Something happened yesterday that changed everything. And if you're waiting for CNN, BBC, or NASA to tell you about it, you might be waiting a long time. Because this story didn't break through Western media channels. It didn't come from American observatories or European space agencies. It came from China. And what their deep space probe detected 48 hours ago challenges everything we thought we understood about what's happening in our solar system right now. On November 10th, 2025, at 11:47 p.m. Beijing time, the Tianwen-3 deep space probe, currently positioned approximately 280 million kilometers from Earth on its journey toward the outer solar system, detected a radio transmission that should not exist. The signal lasted 23 minutes. It was coherent, structured, and powerful enough to be detected clearly across hundreds of millions of kilometers of space. And according to the preliminary data that was leaked through Chinese scientific forums before being hastily deleted, the signal originated from a location that had no known celestial objects. Empty space, deep space, the void between planets where nothing should be transmitting anything. But here's what makes this absolutely extraordinary. The signal wasn't just random noise. It wasn't a natural astronomical phenomenon. It was modulated. It carried information. And the frequency, the specific wavelength on which it was broadcast, was the same frequency that 3I Atlas and its companion object have been using to transmit their mathematical sequences. 1.4204 gigahertz, the hydrogen line, the universal frequency. Let me walk you through what actually happened, what the data actually shows, and why the rapid lockdown of information by multiple governments should concern everyone who cares about truth and transparency. First, let's understand what detected this signal, because that context matters enormously. Tianwen-3 is China's most advanced deep space probe, launched in March 2024 as part of their expanding solar system exploration program. Its primary mission is to study the outer planets and eventually enter interstellar space, following in the footsteps of the Voyager probes, but with far more sophisticated instruments. The probe carries a suite of scientific equipment including high-resolution cameras, spectrometers, particle detectors, and most importantly for this story, an extremely sensitive radio receiver designed to detect faint emissions from distant astronomical objects. That radio receiver is more advanced than anything on the Voyager probes. It can detect signals across a broad frequency range with resolution and sensitivity that represents the cutting edge of current technology. It's designed to pick up everything from natural radio emissions from planets and stars to potential artificial signals from hypothetical extraterrestrial civilizations. The China National Space Administration doesn't talk about SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, as openly as Western agencies. But they built that capability into Tianwen-3 nonetheless, just in case. On November 10th, that capability detected something. According to information shared through Chinese astronomical forums and scientific messaging groups before being systematically deleted, Tianwen-3 radio receiver locked onto a strong narrowband signal at 1.4204 gigahertz at approximately 11:47 p.m. Beijing time. Narrowband is the key word here. Natural radio sources in space, like pulsars or radio galaxies or the sun itself, emit across broad frequency ranges. Their signals are spread out, diffuse, the product of chaotic physical processes. Artificial signals are different. When you want to transmit information efficiently, you concentrate your energy into a narrow frequency band. You don't waste power spreading your signal across a broad spectrum. You pick a specific channel and you broadcast there. This signal was narrowband, extremely narrowband. The frequency width was less than 1 hertz, meaning the transmission was concentrated into an incredibly precise wavelength with almost no spread. That level of precision doesn't occur naturally. That's engineered, that's designed. The signal persisted for 23 minutes, during which time Tianwen-3 instruments recorded everything. The frequency, the modulation pattern, the signal strength, the polarization. all the characteristics that would allow analysts to determine what they were looking at. And then at 12:10 a.m. on November 11th, the signal stopped, not fading gradually, not weakening as the probe's orientation changed. It simply ceased as if someone had flipped a switch. Here's where this gets really interesting, because Tianwen-3 didn't just detect the signal, it triangulated its origin. Radio telescopes can determine the direction a signal is coming from by analyzing how it arrives at their antennas. It's not as precise as optical observations, but for a strong signal like this one, the directional information is quite good. The analysis showed that the signal originated from a region of space approximately 170 million kilometers from Earth, in a direction roughly 35 degrees off the ecliptic plane, in the constellation of Carina as seen from Earth. There's nothing there. No planets, no asteroids, no comets, no known celestial objects at all, just empty interplanetary space, the vast void between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. Except it's not empty anymore, because something in that location transmitted a powerful radio signal directly toward Tianwen-3, or perhaps toward Earth, and Tianwen-3 just happened to be in the path. The Chinese Space Administration immediately tasked other assets to observe that location. Radio telescopes on Earth, other space-based instruments, everything they could redirect quickly enough. They were searching for whatever was there, whatever had transmitted that signal. According to the leaked information, they found nothing. Optically, the region appears empty. No visible objects, no reflected sunlight, nothing that conventional telescopes can detect. But the signal happened. It was recorded. The data exists. Something transmitted from that empty region of space, and Tianwen-3 captured every second of it. This is where the story transitions from remarkable to absolutely staggering. Because the signal wasn't just a carrier wave, a simple tone proving that something artificial was out there. It was modulated. It carried data. It was a message. The leaked information includes descriptions of the signal structure, though not the complete raw data that would allow independent analysis. According to multiple sources within the Chinese scientific community who shared information before being silenced, the signal consisted of repeated sequences of pulses, very similar to what 3i Atlas and its companion have been transmitting. Prime numbers appeared in the pattern. The first 50 prime numbers, encoded in the timing of signal bursts, exactly the same mathematical signature that has become the calling card of the interstellar visitors. But the message didn't stop with primes. After the mathematical introduction, the pattern changed. The signal began encoding what analysts believe is a coordinate system, a three-dimensional map of the solar system with specific locations marked. 3 locations, to be precise. The first location corresponds to where 3i Atlas and its companion object are currently positioned, moving through the inner solar system after their close approach to the Sun. The second location is where Fragment B, the mysterious artificial fragment that emerged from the 3i Atlas breakup, is currently maneuvering on its independent trajectory. And the third location, the one that sent chills through every analyst who saw it, points to that empty region of space 170 million kilometers from Earth, the location where the signal itself originated. It's a revelation, an announcement, a declaration that says, we are here, and we are here. 3 objects, 3 locations, a coordinated presence in our solar system. Now let me explain why this signal is being called impossible by physicists who have seen the data. The signal strength detected by Tianwen-3 was approximately -180 dBm, which in radio engineering terms represents an extremely faint signal, close to the noise floor of the receiver. That makes sense for something transmitted across 170 million kilometers of space. Radio signals weaken with distance, spreading out as they travel, requiring sensitive equipment to detect at great range. But here's the problem. To produce a signal that's strong at the receiving end, the transmitter would need to be broadcasting with enormous power. Dr. Wei Chen, a radio astronomer at Tsinghua University who was part of the early analysis before being ordered to cease public discussion, calculated the required transmission power based on the signal's strength and distance. His numbers suggested a transmitter operating at approximately 100 kilowatts of power, assuming a reasonably directional antenna. That's enormous. That's the output of a small radio station on Earth. That's far beyond what any spacecraft humanity has built could generate with solar panels at that distance from the Sun. At 170 million kilometers from the Sun, solar intensity is less than 10% of what it is at Earth's orbit. Solar panels would generate minimal power. Any spacecraft at that distance would need nuclear power sources to operate high-power transmitters. And remember, this signal came from empty space where optical observations show nothing. No spacecraft, no visible object, nothing reflecting sunlight. Whatever transmitted that signal is either very small and very power-dense, or it's using an energy source we don't understand. That's the impossible part. Not just that the signal exists, but that it shouldn't be possible to generate that much power in that location with any technology we currently understand. Unless, of course, the technology isn't ours. Within hours of the detection, the China National Space Administration initiated what sources describe as an unprecedented emergency response. Senior officials were briefed. The Central Military Commission was notified, and a complete communications lockdown was imposed on everyone involved with the Tianwen-3 mission. Scientists who had been actively discussing the detection on academic forums were contacted and instructed to delete their posts and refrain from further public discussion. Research groups that had been sharing preliminary analysis were told to suspend their work pending official review. The Great Firewall, China's sophisticated internet censorship system, was updated to actively filter and remove references to the Tianwen-3 detection. Posts on Weibo, China's version of Twitter, were deleted within minutes of appearing. Forum threads discussing the signal were locked or removed entirely. But here's the thing about information in the digital age. Once it's out, it's out. Screenshots were taken. Data was copied. Information was shared through encrypted channels and international networks that the Chinese government couldn't completely control. Western intelligence agencies became aware of the situation within 24 hours. By November 11th, NASA, ESA, and other space agencies had been briefed on what Tianwen-3 had detected, and their response was equally telling. Silence, complete public silence about an event that, if confirmed, represents the most significant astronomical discovery in human history. Here's what makes this situation absolutely extraordinary from a political and strategic perspective. China, the United States, Russia, and the European space agencies are in a state of constant competition. They race to be first to explore new destinations, first to achieve new capabilities, first to claim scientific discoveries. But on November 11th, something unprecedented happened. Within 36 hours of the Tianwen-3 detection, representatives from NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, and CNSA participated in emergency closed-door meetings coordinated through the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. These weren't scheduled meetings. These weren't routine diplomatic consultations. These were emergency sessions convened with a speed that diplomatic sources describe as unprecedented. What were they discussing? Officially, we don't know. But sources close to the meetings, speaking anonymously, suggest that the topic was coordinated response protocols for potentially significant astronomical events. In other words, they were deciding together how to handle this, what to tell the public, what data to share, how to manage a situation that transcends national interests because it involves something beyond Earth entirely. The fact that they're coordinating at all is remarkable. The fact that they're coordinating to keep information secret rather than to share it is deeply troubling. Dr. Michio Kaku, when asked about reports of international coordination on space-related matters, didn't hold back. When rival nations suddenly start cooperating on secrecy, when competition is replaced by coordination on information control, that tells you something extremely significant is happening, something that scares them all equally. While official agencies imposed their information lockdown, amateur astronomers around the world were doing what they do best: observing, recording, sharing data. Several groups, aware of the leaked reports about the signal's origin location, pointed their radio telescopes at those coordinates. Radio astronomy isn't limited to professional observatories. Enthusiasts with satellite dishes, software-defined radios, and patience can detect a lot of what's happening in space. And they detected something. Multiple amateur radio astronomy groups in Europe, North America, and Australia report detecting faint, periodic signals from the approximate region of space indicated by the Tianwen-3 data. Not the powerful transmission that the probe detected, but something weaker. Background emissions, the radio signature of active electronics. It's like pointing a radio receiver at a distant city and picking up the cumulative electromagnetic noise of all the electrical systems operating there. You're not hearing any specific broadcast, but you can detect that something is there, something is powered on, something is operating. These detections have been shared through international amateur networks, posted on forums and websites that operate independent of government control. The data isn't as sophisticated as what Tianwen-3 captured, but it's consistent. Something in that region of space is emitting radio frequency energy. And optical observers have reported something equally intriguing. Several astrophotographers, taking deep exposures of that region of space to search for anything visible, have detected faint anomalies. Not stars, which appear as points of light. Not asteroids, which move against the background stars in predictable ways. But something that appears in multiple images taken hours apart, seemingly stationary relative to the solar system, but not matching any known object. The images are ambiguous. They could be artifacts, cosmic rays hitting the camera sensor, processing errors. But they're consistent across multiple independent observers using different equipment. Something might be there, something dark enough that it doesn't reflect much sunlight, but present nonetheless. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture, because this signal from deep space doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a pattern that's been developing for months. 3I Atlas entered our solar system in July, exhibiting increasingly unusual behavior. It changed colors, developed unusual plasma jets, released helium, and maintained a trajectory that suggested non-gravitational acceleration. Then it fragmented on November 9th in an event that released enormous energy and revealed Fragment B, an artificial object with geometric features, internal power generation, and active maneuvering capabilities. And now, on November 10th, less than 24 hours after the 3I Atlas breakup, a signal is detected from deep space using the same frequency, the same mathematical language, the same communication protocol. The timing cannot be coincidental. The breakup happened, and something out in deep space responded. Or perhaps the breakup was a signal itself, and this transmission was the acknowledgement. Dr. Avi Loeb, analyzing the limited information available about the Chinese detection, wrote in his blog, "If these reports are accurate, and I emphasize if because we don't have access to the primary data, then we're observing coordinated activity between multiple objects in our solar system. This isn't a single interstellar visitor. This is a presence. Multiple objects communicating, coordinating. That changes everything." The implications are staggering. If there are 3 distinct objects or groups of objects in our solar system, all artificial, all active, all communicating with each other, then this isn't exploration. This isn't a probe passing through. This is an operation, a mission, something planned and executed with multiple assets deployed across millions of kilometers of space. Let's return to the impossible signal problem, because this is where the physics becomes truly mind-bending. Dr. Sarah Chen, who has been analyzing every aspect of the 3I Atlas situation, ran calculations on what would be required to power a 100-kilowatt transmitter at 170 million kilometers from the sun. Solar panels at that distance would generate approximately 140 watts per square meter of panel area under optimal conditions. To generate 100 kilowatts would require roughly 700 square meters of solar panels. That's a lot. That's the size of several tennis courts. But that assumes perfect efficiency and optimal orientation, which is never achievable in reality. More realistically, you'd need twice that area, perhaps 1,500 square meters of panels. An object with that much surface area dedicated to solar panels would be visible. It would reflect sunlight. Telescopes would see it easily at that distance. But optical observations show nothing, which means solar power isn't the answer. Nuclear power is the obvious alternative. A small nuclear reactor or radioisotope thermoelectric generator could produce that much power from a compact package. The Voyager probes use RTGs that generate hundreds of watts from plutonium-238 decay. But to generate 100 kilowatts continuously would require either a massive amount of radioactive material or a full nuclear reactor design. And that raises the question, what kind of civilization sends nuclear-powered probes across interstellar space? The answer: a civilization with technology far beyond our current capabilities. A civilization that thinks in terms of million-year timescales and interstellar distances the way we think about crossing oceans. Chen's analysis concluded with a statement that's been widely shared in scientific circles. The energy budget required for this signal suggests technology that's either far more efficient than anything we've developed, or based on physical principles we don't yet understand. While space agencies were coordinating their information lockdown, military organizations around the world were taking a very different kind of action. According to sources with knowledge of military space operations, the United States Space Force, Chinese People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force, and Russian space forces have all redirected surveillance assets toward the coordinates of the deep space signal. These aren't scientific instruments. These are reconnaissance satellites, early warning systems, and tracking networks designed to monitor threats. They're being used to watch a region of space where something invisible is transmitting powerful radio signals. What are they watching for? Movement, course changes, any indication that whatever is out there might be approaching Earth or other strategic locations. The military perspective is fundamentally different from the scientific one. Scientists want to study, understand, and potentially communicate. Military planners want to monitor, assess threat levels, and maintain defensive readiness. Both responses are happening simultaneously, creating tension between the desire for transparency and the perceived need for security. General James Dickinson, commander of U.S. Space Command, made a brief public statement on November 11th that seemed innocuous but carried significant subtext. He said, "Space Command maintains continuous awareness of all objects and activities in the space domain that could affect U.S. interests. We are vigilant, we are prepared, and we stand ready to respond to any situation." That statement, issued the day after the Tianwen-3 detection, wasn't scheduled. It wasn't part of any regular briefing. It was a message, carefully crafted to reassure without revealing. A signal that the military is aware of something and is responding without saying what that something is. Let me explain another aspect of this signal that has physicists scratching their heads, because it involves something that should be impossible according to our current understanding. The signal was detected at 1.4204 gigahertz, the hydrogen line frequency. But that's the frequency in the reference frame of the transmitter. When objects are moving relative to each other, radio signals experience what's called the Doppler shift, the same effect that makes an ambulance siren change pitch as it passes you. For a signal transmitted from an object 170 million kilometers away, moving through space at some velocity relative to Earth and relative to Tianwen-3, there should be a measurable Doppler shift. The received frequency should be slightly higher or lower than the transmitted frequency, depending on whether the object is moving toward or away from the receiver. But according to the leaked data, the signal was received at exactly 1.4204 gigahertz. No shift, no offset, perfect frequency match. That should be impossible unless one of three things is true. First possibility. The transmitter is completely stationary relative to Tianwen 3, matching the probe's velocity through space exactly. That would require precise knowledge of the probe's trajectory and active station keeping to maintain relative velocity. Possible for advanced technology, but it indicates intentional coordination. Second possibility. The transmitter is actively correcting for Doppler shift, adjusting its transmission frequency in real time to ensure it arrives at exactly the hydrogen line frequency at the receiver. This would require knowing the receiver's velocity and position precisely. Again, possible with advanced technology, but it indicates deliberate targeting. Third possibility. The signal doesn't experience Doppler shift through some mechanism we don't understand, some physics that operates differently than we expect. All three possibilities are extraordinary. All three suggest technology and capabilities far beyond what humanity has achieved. While scientists analyze the physics of the signal, amateur cryptographers and signal processing enthusiasts were working on a different problem, trying to decode the data content of the transmission. The complete data hasn't been publicly released, but fragments of information about the signal structure have leaked through various channels, enough for determined enthusiasts to start reconstructing and analyzing the pattern. A group calling themselves the Cosmic Decode Project, consisting of cryptographers, mathematicians, and signal processing experts from around the world, have been collaborating online to analyze every fragment of information available about the Tianwen 3 signal. Their preliminary findings, posted on multiple forums and websites, suggest that after the prime number sequence and the coordinate data, the signal contained what appears to be a time reference. A countdown. The pattern suggests a duration of approximately 47 days, encoded in a format that uses Earth's rotation period and orbital period as reference units. It's a duration that assumes the receiver understands Earth-based time measurement, which itself is remarkable. 47 days from November 10th brings us to late December, specifically around December 27th. What happens on that date? We don't know, but a countdown implies an event, something scheduled, something that will occur at a specific time. The Cosmic Decode Project's analysis comes with heavy caveats. They're working from incomplete data, from second-hand descriptions of signal patterns, from fragments of leaked information. Their conclusions might be entirely wrong. But if they're right, if there is a countdown embedded in that signal, then whatever is happening in our solar system isn't finished. It's building towards something, an event, a revelation, a moment that has been planned and scheduled. With all of this information, with the Tianwen 3 detection, with Fragment B maneuvering through space, with 3I Atlas's coordinated companion, with signals and countdowns and invisible transmitters in deep space, there's one question that no official source will address directly. Are we being visited by an extraterrestrial civilization? It seems like an obvious question. It seems like the most natural interpretation of everything we're observing. Multiple artificial objects in our solar system, communicating with each other, using advanced propulsion, transmitting signals with mathematical content, operating with capabilities beyond our technology. What else could it be? But no space agency, no government official, no institutional scientist in an official capacity will say those words. They'll talk about unexplained phenomena. They'll mention anomalous observations requiring further study. They'll emphasize the need for careful analysis before drawing conclusions. But they won't say the obvious. They won't state what the evidence is clearly indicating. Why? Maybe because once you say it, once you officially acknowledge that extraterrestrial intelligence is present in our solar system, everything changes. International relations change. Social structures change. Religious beliefs are challenged. The entire human self-conception shifts. Or maybe because the people who know the most, who have access to the complete data rather than fragments and leaks, understand something we don't. Maybe they know that what's happening is even more complex, more significant, or more concerning than simple visitation by alien probes. As I write this on November 12th, the situation continues to develop. Tianwen-3 continues its journey through the outer solar system, its radio receivers presumably still listening for additional transmissions. Fragment B continues maneuvering through the inner solar system on its independent trajectory. And somewhere in the deep space between Mars and Jupiter, something invisible is emitting radio frequency energy that amateur astronomers around the world are trying to detect and analyze. The international coordination between space agencies continues. The information lockdown remains in place, and the public is left with fragments of information, leaked data, and amateur observations that collectively paint a picture of something extraordinary happening in our solar system. China's Tianwen-3 probe captured an impossible signal from deep space. A signal that by all rights shouldn't exist, transmitted with power that shouldn't be achievable, from a location where nothing should be present. But the signal happened, the data exists, and the implications are profound. We are not alone in our solar system. Something is here, multiple somethings, coordinated and active and communicating. They're using technology beyond our current capabilities. They've traveled from another star system. And they're doing something, executing some kind of plan or mission that we don't yet understand. The secret governments won't share is that they know this. They've confirmed it. They're monitoring it. And they've decided that humanity isn't ready to be told officially. But the truth is leaking out anyway, through Chinese scientists who shared data before being silenced, through amateur astronomers who can't be stopped from observing the sky, through analysts and enthusiasts around the world who are piecing together fragments of information into a coherent picture. Subscribe to this channel. Follow these developments. Because what's unfolding right now, what China's probe detected, and what other nations are confirming through their own observations, is the most important story in human history. And you deserve to know the truth, even if your governments think otherwise. The countdown has begun. Whatever is scheduled for late December, whatever these objects are preparing for, we have weeks to wait and watch and wonder. But we don't have to wait in ignorance. We can demand transparency. We can share information. We can work together across borders and institutions to understand what's happening in our solar system. Because this isn't just China's discovery. It's not NASA's secret or ESA's responsibility or any single nation's crisis. This is humanity's moment, and we all have a right to face it with our eyes open.